Okay. Sorry. It timed out and paused all at the same time, so I couldn't even end my sentence there. I'll wait for you guys just a second. Come back, and we'll go over this stuff. There we go. Let's see. Yeah, it timed out. It timed out and paused at the same time, so I couldn't even finish my sentence. It was kind of stupid. But here's what we're going to do. We'll finish talking about this before we start messing around with stuff. The paint wizard. Thank you. Okay, so like I was saying a minute ago, before we got timed out, if you get a chunk, if you drop your helmet and you knock out a chunk, and it's just this bald patch sitting on the back side of your helmet, the front side of your helmet, whatever it is, wherever you drop it and whatever happens, use that to your advantage. Let's say you even chip something. You chip it off, like if you break a chunk off, make it look like it was damaged on purpose. So when I had this happen, and this is what happened, I dropped this and it scraped all this paint off. There was not really much damage back here to begin with. So when it dropped and it knocked this chunk right there, it just had this white bald patch, and I was super irritated. It was sad, was freaking out about it, but I figured I'd use that as an opportunity to add more damage. Like, let's say this guy's wearing this helmet, he's sitting in there banging his head on things, or if he's in a group of Mandos, like he's resting his head on things, taking a break. Maybe his head butts up against a speeder bike. Whatever happens, we add that character in there. So I just took the sandpaper and I kept sanding on an edge to kind of add more of a directional gouge. So that way, when you look at it, it doesn't look like, oh, he dropped his helmet. It looks like it was supposed to be there on purpose. And in order to make this not stand out as much, I added the back on there as well. So there's these two bald patches here. I thought I added another one somewhere else. No, I guess it was just those two bald patches there. But it adds a little bit more character. So you don't have to worry about keeping the damage that you make on your helmet and leaving it the way it is. You can always keep going and improving with it. The longer you have a prop, the more it's going to get beat up, and the more chances you're going to have to make it look different. You want it to age with you. You don't want something to look the exact same forever. There's no fun in that. So beating things up, taking things apart, all that fun stuff is kind of the name of the game. Yeah, see? Yeah, it's just like if you're resting against a wall, or even the side thing, like let's say maybe his ship has some sort of bracket above that bumps his head. Maybe it's tight quarters in there, and his head keeps rubbing on that. If he's going through turbulence or something, he's rubbing on that over time. You get this natural wear pattern. Same thing with the back here. And I will say a lot of my military buddies, Army tankers, or people who have to wear big earphones on the sides of their heads over time, they'll tell you the hair around around their ears will actually wear away over time if they're in long enough, and they'll have these little bald patches around their ears. So wear patterns from consistent bumping and tugging, or brushing up against something, will add to a prop. So if you drop it, damage it, whatever, leave it and just make it work. Add more damage to it. Just get creative with it. Because there's no fun in keeping something the same. Like, I think this bucket itself went through like 4 different renditions. Like, I tried the rip tape method with Krylon, and it wasn't consistent. It ripped massive chunks out, and that's all it did. So like all these chunks and everything was all the same tape ball method we did with our plates just now, but it was done with a different paint. This was Krylon, and it just pulled chunks off. Like, as you can see, it's massive chunky weathering, which I didn't really like. So, and this is all this little stuff, this little damage here that's kind of blobby, that was used with masking fluid. So before I started the little tape ball method with this other paint, that's what that masking fluid was. And they just a little blobby. They're not sharp. They're too similar. There's no inconsistencies with it, so I didn't really like it. So that's why we went with the other route. And that's, my first stripe. The first stripe. All the stripes originally were red, and all my helmets were like this kind of tan desert color until I did the green helmet, and then I did instead of a red stripe, I did the white stripe. I like that. But this is that resin helmet. This is from Zero Cool Props. It's like one of the first helmets I got. It is heavy. And this is just cast resin. So, yay and at the same time. So now what we're going to do is, I think this stuff has had time to set up long enough. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of weathering. Yeah, that's dry. That's good. That's all dry. That one might still be drying, so we'll leave it a little bit. So, let's see. I'm painting armor right now. I got your live message. Yes! That's awesome. I have the Cyclops helm. Eastwood. I have the Cyclops one. I got both. I have that one and a Cyclops. I have to say the Cyclops is my favorite visor. And the T visor is awesome, but that Cyclops is my favorite. You can't see anything out of that helmet. Just saying. Here, I'll go grab that one real quick. So, this was the second helmet I've ever painted. So same maker, Zero Cool Props. This is the Cyclops version. And it's actually one of my favorite helmets. I really love this helmet. I love that it's kind of got this nice smooth on either side. It's got this plate, actually, I think it screws in. It came with the rangefinder and these other things, and I opted just to do the antenna because it looked different. So I actually modified the helmet and attached this antenna here. But yeah, this is, again, again, this is overcoated with, what the hell, it's completely lost train of thought. This has got a clear coat over it. So you can kind of see how it's more of a gray. It's not really a shiny silver. It's kind of grayed out. And now since I painted over all my silver stuff, I don't really have a good... So you can kind of see the difference. See how this one is a lot brighter? And from my view, it's silver. It's metallic silver. But from your view, it's probably white. You can see the difference. So metallic silver versus the overcoat is just kind of gray. It's like a dull steel metal color. So it still looks cool. It's just, and I did have some interesting things happen with this paint too. So if you can see this, all this weird texture here happened because I painted with two different types of paint, and it started getting all bubbly, warpy, like it textured itself. And to be honest, I was worried about it because it didn't look like it was setting up at all. It wasn't drying, and I just kind of liked it. I left it. So I went ahead and I just left it and did a clear coat over it, and it looks fine, and it doesn't pick off now, but it's been in like a while since I painted this thing. I got my stripes. Oh, and my favorite part about this whole helmet, right here. So I really wanted to incorporate the skull, the Mythosaur skull, on a helmet. I didn't know how to incorporate it without it looking tacky, so I put it on here. I stenciled it out after everything was painted. I stenciled it out, spray painted it over it, pulled the stencil off, and then waited for it to dry a bit, and then I sanded it to get this. That is, you know, how I got this. I just sanded it and chipped it away until it looked like it was worn down pretty good. You can still see what it is, but it's nice and beat up. But there you go. There's the Cyclops. Yeah, I couldn't figure out where to put it. Everybody's like, oh, put it in the cheeks, and it kind of looked weird. So this had this big back empty panel, and it needed a little something, you know, because I have the antenna on this side. Figured it needed to be on there. So that's where I went. Looked good. I really like it. This helmet looks amazing in black and gray photos. In color, it's okay, but black and gray is better. But I think there's a picture of this in black and gray on like the bottom side of my Instagram page somewhere. But if anybody wants a cool location to put there we go. This one isn't as heavy as the other one. This one still kind of feels similar to the 3D printed version, but it's similar. It's not complete. It's still got a little heft to it. The main problem is these things are so hot on the insides because of the material. It just insulates that heat, and it's terrible. Terrible. What do I recommend for reinforcing buckets? I don't know what you mean by that one. Reinforcing the bucket. Alex, hit me with Alexa. Alexa, sorry, not Alex. Alexa. You mean in the T-visor? Or I'm not sure if they're thin in a print. Oh, if they're thin in a print, you might be able to pour some epoxy resin in there and just paint a coat of epoxy resin on the inside, like a 2-part, just and mix it and paint it in there. It should be good. Like the nose pieces in the visor, like in the nose pieces. I'm guessing you mean visor. Okay, so we'll just go to this real quick while this question's up. So this is the Maker Baked 3D print. Lightweight, super lightweight. It doesn't insulate. The heat in there, so you don't fry your brains. But this has a nice thickness to it. All Maker Bake stuff, all the 3D printed stuff, has got a nice thickness. I've never had any problem with it being too thin. But if you are trying to make the front, because I know a lot of makers don't have a brace in the front between the cheeks where the visor goes. I know that a lot of people have problems with the visor separating, or the glue that holds the visor in is the only thing holding the cheeks together, and that can cause problems. But if you don't have a support here, I always say put a support. So whether it be popsicle sticks that you hot glue in here, or a piece of plastic that you form and glue in, you always want a support in here. That way it keeps it from flexing, from misshaping. Like I'm squeezing this and I can't change the shape of this. It's not working. But if it didn't have and it was only this in there, it would flex. Yeah. Front braces are pretty much the way to go when it comes to buckets, especially over time. You don't want them to warp. If you're in a hot area, like Hawaii gets pretty warm. Like right now it's ridiculous. It's like 80 something. But the humidity is killing me. It can cause the glue to separate and flex out. So you want to make sure that whatever brace you put in here, you have it in there, and that'll hold its shape forever, unless you snap it off. Then it won't be holding it. So okay. So back to painting. I think. So we'll black wash this bad boy. Now let me get my pod racing cup out. How many of you are old enough to remember this bad boy? I still have these. I've been using this cup since what, 1999? is when this cup came out, I believe. This has been my paint mixing cup for forever. And originally it came with an Anakin topper on the top of it where it looks like he's sitting in a pod racer. So this is my paint mixing cup, and it has been for any painting that I'm doing, whether it be for props or for an actual painting, which I'm doing less of nowadays because I don't have time, but I do that. So I'll go ahead and get out our magic paper towel, cup of water. So I do a different technique when it comes to gray wash than most people do. I feel like it saves a bit of time and headache. I saw the UV Pepsi cans. Yes, episode 1 Pepsi cans. So if you're doing black wash, this is what I use. Because this is an acrylic paint and this is acrylic spray paint, it goes together very well. It doesn't just disappear over time on you. You still have a lot of easy work time with it, and if you don't like it while you're doing, you can wipe it off with water. So some people use like oil base and stuff like that. I don't really mess with the oil base just because it's I don't know, I just don't mess with it. But anyway, so a lot of people use, like, they'll lay down this huge wash, and that's why they call it black wash, because they wash over everything. But whatever. I like to do paper towels, dab and wipe, and get finger painting, so we can get dirty now. So whatever area that you're going to be working on, let's say I want to get it down and dirty in here. Just lay it on there, nice and thick. And get the surface a little wet and go in here, and then take my hand and wipe off the excess. And what that does is that gets all in those little nooks and crannies. It gets all over in those little deeper grooves and stuff. So it starts adding a little bit more. And it's another reason why I really like acrylic, is you can dab it in there and blend it in with your finger, so where it gets in all the crevices and everything, but doesn't completely stain the surface. You don't have to wipe off, you don't have to dab up, and you can control how dirty you want your little divots to be. So that's it. So let's say you can't, like right in this area, there's not a whole lot of definition. I mean, you can still kind of see where things are, but kind of wipe away your finger. If you want, you can buff out some areas. And now look, now you have a lot of really nice depth in this battle damage in the corner. So comparison. So we have all our texture and our divots on this side without the wash in there, and then this side with the wash in. Now normally I do with oranges and yellow tones. Instead of doing a bunch of black, I actually use a red. It's a Van Dyke red, and I put it in a lot of these areas, so it actually accents really nice with the orange, and it's like a little deeper tone. I completely forgot to bring that out, so we'll worry about that later. I'll add that stuff in here in a minute, but I just wanted to go through and show you what black does. And it adds nice depth without getting too overly crazy. And you don't have to do this over the whole thing. So a lot of people do too, is they go crazy with it and they do a black wash over the entire prop. You don't need to do that. You just want to accent certain areas. And especially if you're in the high sides. There's a different word for it, but your high areas, you don't want to have a whole lot of wash on. And like people, when they're dabbing it off, they don't dab enough sometimes. It's here or there. Not saying any method is wrong. I just say for me, I want to make sure that it flows well when you're in photos and stuff. So I like to do sporadic, uneven washes or whatever we're going to call this, finger painting methods. So that way it's not just a big consistent dark patch. Like I got a little black just kind of spattered over here, which is fine. Peaks and valleys. There we go. Thank you, Waldo. Can't believe I freaking like. All right, so do a little bit more finger painting, just in this little groove there. Look at that. Right out of the gate, we have almost a completely ready to go part. I think maybe if it's more dirty on this bottom side, we'll continue to add a little. It's a little thick. I'll water that down. Add a little extra grime to the lower section of this, just so it looks like it's getting closer to the ground. And that's the other thing. The closer you are to the ground, the dirtier things are going to be, like on your legs, your lower torso, anything that's closer to the ground, that's where it's going to be have more grime and dirt. So when you're doing your stuff, there you go, might as well use my shirt while I'm at it. Make sure that you're taking gravity into consideration when you're doing this stuff, because you want to make sure that you have a nice flow throughout your whole costume, so it doesn't end up like you have just like you're in a solid dust storm and everything's dirty. You want to make sure there's variance, so it keeps the eye traveling throughout the costume. I'm surprised you got the what part am I on? I can't even remember what part I'm on. Wait, JGBA. Sorry, my brain is off right now. There we go. So this is all I want to do with the black. I don't want to do heavy blacks because it's too dark. So when we go in with our reds, our red wash, our red finger painting, it's going to make this look way better. I don't like to do a lot of heavy black when it comes to warm tones like this, like oranges or yellows or reds. I don't like to use black too much. Even with our overspray here, and we can do this here in a second with our magic black, just to kind of see how that changes things. We can do that real quick, actually. Why not? These plates, Waldo, these plates are the ABS plastic plates from Moncal Prop Shop. So they're not my normal 3D printed parts, but they're just something we're messing around. How did you get the light scratches? Light scratches like these guys? This scratch, here I'll go, let's show in detail. So this scratch here, I did with my thumbnail. When it was still kind of tacky, I just drug my thumbnail in there, and it's still kind of tacky, so you can do it a little bit more. So you just add like a little gouge right there, easy peasy. And if I wanted to make this a little heavier, I just dig my nail into it again. Oh, you're fancy. Car panels. Like yours is metal? I want metal. I wish I could do metal fab, because I would make everything out of metal, aluminum. There's a guy, crap, I forget, the Welding Geek on YouTube, and he makes all this stuff out of metal, out of aluminum and stuff, and I love it. I wish I could have everything out of actual metal, because I would be less afraid to roll around in the dirt and the mud and stuff, because metal's fun to. It's a little bit sturdier, holds up better. So that's that. So here's that's our black dabs on this guy. The rest we're gonna do with a nice red wash. But I will use some of this magic black and show you how that shadows stuff out, just so you have a little idea of how this works. So I will say that if you buy Montana Gold, and this might seem like a no-brainer kind of thing, but a lot of people who purchased this have returned these back to the store because it doesn't spray. It's broken. I got a broken can. It doesn't spray. You have to take the safety tab out of the can. I know this seems kind of like a no-brainer thing, but believe me, I've seen it and heard it. Also, too, before I go right into spraying, I shake. Before I spray out a bunch just in the air because it does have a little bit of a delay, so it shoots out a bunch of the other stuff before it actually gets to the paint. So you always want to real quick before you actually go into actual painting. And then, so if you can see, this is the beforehand where there's not much shade to this. There's just a little bit of the depth here and there. What we're going to do is lightly dust, so not directly onto the part. So we're not aiming here, we're going to aim here and let the overspray just kind of coat the edge here. And yes, not only are these safety tabs cool for greeblies, but they're also good for keeping stuff like your props if you're painting off of your painting surface. You can put them underneath all the corners and stuff so it keeps it off so you can get your hands under there. So if you have a tight project that you're working on that doesn't have a lot of room under there and you don't want it touching, because when you're spraying you want to make sure that you're getting up under all these corners, these are great for that. It sets things up higher, and I really like that. Use what you got, man. You gotta. All right, so here we go. We're gonna go ahead and aim right around here and let the overspray kind of take over. All right, and I don't know if you can see, it's on the darker side here. See how it kind of gave it a nice hazy kind of dirty mist to it. So it's not a heavy black. It's got a nice kind of transition through it. It's like mystic black for a reason. However, I use bananas. Bananas work. Bananas. I'm not even going to ask. Bananas. I can't get it out of my head now. So what we're going to do now is, because I sprayed this and it does have clear mixed into this to keep it kind of light and not heavy, so it has that clear coat in there, and I don't want that clear coat on the silver because it dulled it out. So I don't know if you can see the difference. So it was shiny, dark gray, so it grayed out. So in order to kind of take care of that, we'll go back over just a little bit and remove from our just like a little area there. And what that does is it brings back the shiny silver and adds a little bit more wear damage to the piece. So you end up with, it's almost like a gradient in the silver itself. So sometimes I won't even do the whole thing, and I will let some of this sit. There you go. So now we have our reflective back. So even when you spray and you want that reflective surface back, just go right back in over it and retape and re-pull, because you want to make sure that you get your reflective surface back. So there you have a nice dirty undertone that's not super heavy saturated, so it still looks orange, but it has a shadow. It's the same thing I did a lot with my Dirty Larry helmet. If those of you who know what that is, it's my Stormtrooper helmet that I painted up to look a little fancier. I used a lot of that on the underside, and it gives a nice shadow contour, even though the shadow's not real. So even in photos, if you don't have good lighting, and you can't create those shadow tones that give a little, that you want there all the time, just spray that on there a little bit. It'll always have a nice shadow tone where you're at, no matter what the lighting is. And the lighting, no matter where the directional is, it's still going to give you a nice reflective surface. Plus it's going to, the light sides are going to keep that orange, and then when it gets to the darker side, that mystic black will catch and it'll look darker shadows. I needed to paint and I had no stands, so I made do with bananas. That is the greatest thing. Use what you got. I mean, I've used some weird stuff. Trust me. I got palm fronds laying around my yard. I got like spray paint caps galore. Like I save all of my spray caps because, like, case in point, and do that. So if I wanted to get an under edge, I can come down from underneath and spray without having to hold the part itself. I use a string and hanging on it, put on a spike. Another method that I have been using when I'm painting parts, if you have a clothing line, like you got, you hang your clothes out to dry. This is what I've been doing. Tape the back, have a little extra hanging up, and then roll a piece over the line, and you got a hanger. That's it. What's up, Anna? So if you got your, that's it. That's all you got to do. Just tape the backside and loop this over like clothing line, and you got yourself a hanger, and you can spray, no problem. And you get that vertical surface, and it's good. So if you are looking and you can use that. That method's pretty tried and true. All right, back tape is key. Look how colorful I am today. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and go back. So I want to add some darker tones right in here and on this other side here. I don't want to do a whole lot of the heavy stuff because remember we were just talking about how you want to keep the dirt and grime lower and around edges rather than the whole thing. So we'll just add a little bit of grime to this. And you just blend it out. That's what I love about acrylic paint, that it can just ball off on the surfaces. Wipe off the excess if you want. Oops, so you're smearing everything around, kind of buff it out. See, acrylic paint is forgiving. So now we got our grime central right in here. I'm gonna wipe this down a little bit more to get rid of that edge there. Okay, that'll work. Let me get a little bit more action over here. Rubbing all these little crevices. Get rid of some of this stuff. Hold on. Just buff it a little bit. The other thing you want to be careful of, and I'll say this before I forget, is that if your paint, your acrylic paint, spray paint isn't completely dry, it still has a bit of texture to it, so it will grab. So you see this little smudge here, that is stuck on there now because I rubbed it in hard to the surface that wasn't completely dry yet. But it's okay because by the time I'm done with all this other stuff, you're not going to see that or notice it. So I'm not worried about it. Let's add some more stuff on this side. Kind of wipe that excess down. There we go. So grime action in here, grime action up there. We have grime action on this side. I just add a little bit more to this downward side. Just needs a little something. And if you really want to later on, you can go back in with a tiny paintbrush. I don't really ever do this, but sometimes if you need, you can go back in with a tiny paintbrush, add little tiny dabs inside the little crevices and just move it around with your finger, and it'll build up around the inside of the nooks, but take away from the center. So you still have a really nice little buildup around it without getting too gross and gnarly. Let's do a quick, oh wait, see if we can get that up and smooth that out a little bit. And here's the dab technique that most people do. That's pretty much it. How wet is this paper towel? This paper towel is that wet, if that makes sense. It's wet enough to it holds water in it, but it's not dripping. So it's pretty damp. And this one's dry. There we go. Soaked. Yes. So what I do is I soak, dip it in the water, soak it up real good, give it a nice squeeze and get all the excess out of it. So it's not dripping, it's not flying water around. But if you give it another squeeze, it'll come out. But a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll do a thin wash over the whole part, and they'll just dab or wipe off or whatever. Oops, see, we got a little, what is that? Gone now. Over the entire part, and then you just kind of dab it or wipe it away, and that works. It works fine. That's a tried and true method. You don't, I mean, if it ain't broke. But I just don't do that. I like doing my own crazy things just for fun. I like being a little different. Boom! Look at that! Oops. See? Whatever. Another cool thing, if you don't know, if you want to add dirt flecks or specks of junk, debris or black or whatever you want to do, is you can just get a brush really wet with a little bit of paint on there. Flick it. Bango bongo. And that will add a spray. So if you do it with red or whatever, you can get a nice like blood spray pattern. I don't want any of that on this, so I'm just going to wipe it back off. And see how all that spray traveled all the way up there. Well, that's all you got to do. You just give it a little flick. Flick the brush. Flick the tip. You shouldn't flick the tip and the bugger going spray, man. Boop. That's it. And so if you saturated, if you wanted like some gnarly Mando action where you soak that in a nice deep red and then give it a flick, it will give the illusion of blood spatter really, really well. So if you want to be graphic, if you want to have like a little added, battle damage, battle splatter, we'll call it battle splatter. You want some battle splatter. I will say, I put that in the wrong end. I will say that you need a brush that is stiff, that's on the stiffer side, and that the bristles aren't a fine, it's not like a fine brush. These are like a thicker bristle. It's going to give you the best results. If you were to try and do that with, let's say, like an actual fine brush, it's not going to give you the same results. You might get like a little fleck here and there or a blob of paint. So GNO's flashbacks. So you always want to go with a stiffer brush that has a thicker bristle. And this came in this pack. This pack of brushes was like $5 out here, so it's probably cheaper in the mainland. And you will get a lot better. You get like, what was it, 17, 18 brushes for like $5. And this is, one of the ones that comes in that set. And I use this a lot for that kind of stuff, that kind of flick detail. So you just kind of, you grind me with it, just give it a little bink. And that's it. Good idea. Yeah, flick a lot of brown on paint on the boots. So my boots, I actually use the same red that I use in this stuff. So the same red wash that I use on these guys to add a bit more of that texture, like dirt texture, I use on the boots, and I'll just smash that paint in there, man, and rub it around a little bit. So just dab, 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 and smear it around a little bit. And when it dries, it looks like a reddish brown dirt, but it's not overpowering. So I think it's called Van Dyke Red that I use for that. I actually can go grab that real quick. I think we have time for me to go grab that. So while I'm running inside to go grab that, you guys can look this over real quick if you want. Think of some questions. I'll be right back. Okay. So I lied. It is not Van Dyke Red. It is burnt umber. And this is a cheap acrylic paint that I've had for years. It's the same tube. I also have this spice brown, which I've never used. I don't even know why I bought it. This is more like a dirt color, spice brown. Another ceramic coat. But this is what I use. There we go. Burnt umber. This looks very, very dark in this light. It's not. It's not that dark. See if I can find... here we go. That's not very good. Well, this sucks. Need some... Let's see. Where can we stash... Oh. There we go. Remember, slogan, use what you got. So this is what we're going to do. Since I don't have a palette, we're going to make one. There we go. Cha-cha. So this is our, what do you say, burnt umber. It's kind of a brownish red. I really like this color a lot for a lot of wash and stuff like that. And you can, if you really want to, mesh this around like you would a wash. Like if you wanted to paint, paint the whole thing with just like a light coat and then dab that stuff off. And depending on the paper towel that you're using, your paper towel will have different textures as well, and that actually adds a little oomph to your stuff. Let's just go ahead and, so same process. Just smear it in there. Yep. It's a little lighter tone, so it's not going to be like a heavy, saturated, dark, globby, gross black like all the rest of this stuff. It just adds like a nice brownish red. Gets in all the little cracks and crevices really nice. Oh, that too much there. Spicy boy. Here's your pumpkin spice. It's that time of year, right? Isn't it pumpkin spice time? Like where everybody goes out and gets a bunch of, you call that basic bitch shit, the pumpkin spice. I'm not gonna lie, I love pumpkin stuff, so I mean I wouldn't drink a pumpkin spice anything, but I guess there's, you know, I know it's like that time of year now, right? Yeah, see, so that brown, it's hard to pick up on this camera, but it is definitely adding a nice little tint to this. So let's go ahead and try that little paintbrush method that I was talking about. So if you just dab a little bit in there, just kind of get a gentle wipe away, it'll stick in these little crevices and stuff, the little cracks and corners. So that's if you want to get super crazy detailed with it. If you want to spend some time, you can go in all these individual little dents here and there and add a little bit of darkness in there. And I'll do that with some of this stuff, the bigger stuff, because it helps. It's their season. Oh, shots fired. Hey, everybody's got to have a season, right? Unfortunately for them, October is a Mandalorian season, so they don't get this October. They can have next October, maybe. This almost looks too uniform right here to me. It needs a little direction. I think I'm going to knock some of this out. So look at that. Here's another thing. This is the white bitches. Because this hasn't cured completely for 24 hours yet, you can still take your nail and dig in there and create little details. So what I'm going to do is just lift some of this with the corner of my thumbnail. And maybe if this blast was here, let's say if shrapnel went this way, so we have directional here, you can add a little vertical direction this way, just with your nail. See, add some. This adds more of a directional blast. So just add some scratches in there just with your finger. That's it. Because it hasn't cured for 24 hours yet. And you can still mess with it a little bit here and there. And you don't have to use your nail. I mean, you can use a pick. You can even use, like, let's say we have this tool right here, our file. So we could, if we wanted a deeper gouge, we could just use our file. Just make little pick marks here and there. See? Got a nice little scrape action. What's the best way to undo the black wash if you come back later and decide it was too enthusiastic? Less is more. So if you decided that there's too much black wash, like you went a little heavy and you're not happy with the way that it looks, because this is an acrylic paint, like let's say I really didn't like the fact that this black stuck here and I wanted it to look better or different. Guess what? I'm not even going to mask anything off. I'm not even going to tape anything. I'm just going to go ahead and take the spray and just mist it. That's all she wrote. That's how I take care of areas that I feel were a little too heavy or too light. If you think that it made it maybe too dark, do that. And see, I made a really, like, you can't tell, but this spot right here, I don't know, maybe you can tell, is super bright orange now. And it's too bright orange. Like, that's like stands out like a sore thumb from my view. Woo! So we're just gonna mess it up. Dab, 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 dab. Done. As simple as that. And then once that dries, you can go back over with your black wash in your corners and your little nooks and crannies. If you want, like, let's say, oops, I painted over my silver. Again, let's just go back in and pick it right back out. And she's good. If you have really messed up and it's more than just a little overspray that you want to rework. It's acrylic, so what you could do is you give it a light sand, or maybe even an alcohol, and just, it's going to dull. Alcohol will dull everything out, so you be careful with that. But if you're a little overzealous with this stuff and the light misting over won't cure what you did, you just make it work, or add little emblem or something over the whole top of it. Yes, for runs too. Yeah. So if you have drips or runs, I try to, when I'm painting all my stuff, even if I'm painting it vertical, as soon as I'm done spraying it, I will lay it flat. Gravity will tend to even it out nicely. But if you do have like a pooling or a dripping or something like that, you can go ahead and just tape, and it will take that away. Same with fingerprints. Obviously, I've handled this thing back and forth. It's, while I was drying and messing things up. Oops, how did I do that? See, I got crap all over the place. And any fingerprints that I may have put in here, for one, you're not going to see. They're gone. Or you can add detail to them or add a fingernail mark through them and it'll take them away completely. So you don't have to really worry about it too much. So I'm going to add a little damage here. There, see? Just add a little bit more damage right there. And maybe right here, just for funsies. And right here. There. Sometimes I'll sit and I'll get nitpicky, and I'll go through and I'll start beating stuff up a little bit more than let's say I needed to, and you can do that with this stuff. But I can take forever on a piece, and I try not to do that anymore, because there is that old adage, less is more, and that applies to armor as well. You don't want to have a super crazy damaged kit, so much so that it looks overbearing and you lose sight of what the whole is, and you focus on pieces. And you don't necessarily want that. You want to be able to focus on your piece as a whole and not too nitpicky on one spot or another. When you do paintings, we call them reads, where your eye goes. Naturally, when you look at anything, whether it be an advertisement, a painting, a photo, whatever you're looking at, your eye goes to three places, usually right out of the gate: a first, second, and third read. So the most catching thing, the second catching thing, and the overall. And people are actually paid to figure out advertising where you want the eye to go first, second, and third. So they actually do that for you. They know where you're going to look before you even know where you're going to look at. And that's what you want to do with your kit as well. What do you want to stand out right away, where you want your eye to travel to, and where you want the thing to look at as a whole? Those are the things I try and keep in mind when I'm painting everything, just so it doesn't get too crazy. Because right now I can focus super heavy on making all these parts here really crazy detailed and kind of all over the place. But when you put them together as a whole, you realize maybe you overplayed it too much, you did too much. So you have to dial it back. For blaster hits, yes, I do. Trying to find something that might be okay to paint on besides this, because I don't want to add a blaster hit to this stuff. Let's see, what do I have around here? Let's see, maybe we'll paint this guy. I'll go back to this guy. Why not? He's out here. Remember I said about evolving things? Let's go ahead and... So we'll set this aside. Put it in the sun so I can have a little dry time. Alright. Blaster marks. Okay, so what we're going to do is figure out... Cardboard might have been good too. I don't have any cardboard laying around right now. figure out where we want our blaster hit. Now, we're talking scorch marks or craters. We can do both. So normally when I do a blaster hit, I will have made a dent in the prop itself, which I've done on the knees. I think those pictures still might be up on my Instagram. If not, ask me. I'll send you a picture of what it is, and maybe we'll do that on the next session. I do have the other plate, this guy, that we can add some battle damage to, probably in a different video. I can do a whole video on battle damage and adding stuff to that. But if we're doing scorch marks, that's pretty easy. Let me get this random piece of paper. All right. So you want a scorch mark. You want to figure out where on the helmet you want it first. Like if you want, let's say this is our dome. Like I want the scorch mark here. This is where my dent's going to be. So what we're going to do is, if this is an actual indentation in the helmet or a dent or even a drag mark, and you want to hit something off of that, usually what I'll do is I'll take my Mystic Black, specifically for scorch marks, take my angular top, figure out which direction that's spraying. Okay, good. So, and I'll do it, it's a lot easier if you have it's vertical, okay. So you take it and you want to hold it at an angle and just kind of an upward stroke, starting from here and flicking it up and out like this. So when it dries, I mean, it's hard to tell too because it's just dark, but it'll have a drag mark as it goes through. And if you want to thin this stuff out, get the tape, lay the tape on either side gently, and peel it up in the areas that you want to have relieved. So if this was hypothetically in my helmet, I don't think this is going to work very well on paper. I didn't want too much of that on there. You know, you just tape it off and it narrows your field. So if we do that on our helmet, where do we want our scorch mark to be? Should we do front damage, side? This might look like a little zing off the top there. We do one off here. Heck, we can even do it off here. This kind of looks like, that's more of a scratch. Let's say that's more of a gash. Let's do it right here. Why not? This is kind of like the most opportune spot to have a scorch mark. So you want to think, which direction is this going to hit? Do you want to hit straight back this way? Do you want to hit at an angle? Personally, I love angles because when you're looking at them sideways, you get more. It's more of a dynamic. If you had it straight back, it might not look right in the photos. So do something like this where it just kind of comes up and off, and it's similar. So we have our little wear pattern right here. Got a nice little section of bead up. So all you want to do, again, is take at an angle. So in this top, again, this is not a special top. It just comes on the primer, and it's like a flat spray. It's just a flat sprayer. So if, let's say, you wanted to get, if they let you, and you go buy your paint, and you want this top, just switch it. Just switch it out in the store and call it good. Because the primer doesn't necessarily need the flat. It doesn't really matter. It's primer. So if you want to get old piratey and just switch it out and buy the paint, you're still buying the paint. It shouldn't matter to them anyway. It should be fine. But if you want that, and it's a vertical spray. So this right now is spraying vertically this way. So I'm kind of in a wind tunnel here, so it's not gonna. So up at an angle. And kind of drag it back. And then we'll take our tape. Oops, a little heavy on that. I mean, a little heavy. And you want to V it out this way, so it does. So this would be our focal point